Now in this additional section, I'm going to build on what Jay has started in the previous video and talk about some additional information, things that have been added and things that have changed in the last couple of years as we've updated and refined our process. Now, everything that Jay said is still relevant. I'm just going to add some granularity to that in this video form, and this is all reflected in the EIA Bridge Binder Volume 3 for field operations. Now, the first additional step is we've added staking construction benchmarks. Now, this is super important because sometimes it can be, especially as we build more bridges, it can be a year or even slightly more from when we are surveying and staking out our site to when we actually show up for the construction layout, and then it can be almost weeks or months before the student team arrives to implement the bridge project. So the landscape can change, the topography can change with agriculture, can change with climate. So we want to re-establish benchmarks on the front of the foundation and the back of the anchor when we are doing our construction layout phase. Now, this is something that is super important because it's what ties our theoretical design into the site, into the survey. It's the only way in which we can actually verify freeboard. It's the only way we know we're building on the correct part of the ground profile. So it is super important that this is done carefully. We also want to verify quality control points, as-built elevations and distances. So the first portion of this is that we want to build this process in early on, right? We want to verify our as-built elevations of our foundation, of our tiers, all the way up to our saddle, and our projected distance, our projected span, as early on and as often as possible during the process so that we can make changes if we need to, right? We can slightly adjust our tier heights within their tolerance. We can slightly adjust our abutment length within its tolerance. And this is much easier than having to rerun all the calculations for a different span or a different delta H if we wait until later in the process and we don't realize that our span is off or our delta H is off until we've already constructed the tower. We've already constructed all the tiers up through the tower and all of the other activities that have gone on up to that point. Now, the second part of this statement is that sometimes this is already complete, and more often our masons are more and more skilled, and they're able to go out to the site and begin the construction layout process as well as the dreaded excavation process before the student team arrives. So it's likely you'll show up some point during the construction layout or excavation process, sometimes even after a foundation or tier has been completed. Now, it is your responsibility as the student team, as the volunteer team, when you show up on site, to go back and verify all of the quality control points. You can't just assume that everything was done correctly. So for this, you're definitely going to need to know how to survey, and I will talk a little bit more about that in a following section on our quick surveying guide, as well as we have an entire surveying course. If you know nothing about surveying, if you know a little bit and just need a refresher, I'll have that guide for you in the following section. And finally, we have a new quality control form that reflects these points above and when you should be taking quality control photos during the process. And then after this, I will share some footage of the construction layout process that I captured when I was on site. Note that this is just one site, just one situation, and I'm just sharing the footage so you can get an idea of what it may look like to perform the construction layout process. Finally, here's a screenshot of the QC form. You can see the added photo icons and pencil icons where as-built documentation is required and as-built QC photos are required. As always, you can find the quality control forms where they've always lived in the field binder appendices of the collaboration folder.